Okay, sagt der Heilige Gemara. Break more tchelas ein labadika. Are you telling me that you cannot test to see if a dye is in fact real tchelas? For Rabbi Yitzchak Bered Rabbi Yehuda Bodik lay, and he had a solution that he could use to test the authenticity of the dye. And what he would do is Maisi Magvigila, he would bring a chemical called alum, Umaya de Chevlalisa, and that was the liquid that comes out of fenugreek, umeme raglayim, and me raglayim, that's ben arboim yoim. And Rashi has two pshatim. Either it means from a child that was 40 days old, or urine from an adult that sat for 40 days to spoil and become very potent. V'tori le begavayu me'urta v'adlet safra. And he would soak the specimen, the coupon, the dyed wool, in this solution to see if the dye would hold fast or if it would start to run. If the dye would start separating from the beged, chazuse, ifrit chazuse psula. That was a clear sign that this was not the real tchelas, and it would be puzzle. Lo ifrit chazuse, but if the color remained fast, then kshera, it's kosher. Rab Ada kamei Rava mishved Ravira Omar, he had a different test. What he would do is Maisa Chamira Arches of the Siri. He would bring the sourdough, the yeast made from barley, the Avila Bagave, and he would push this coupon, this piece of wool dyed into the dough, and he would bake it with the dough. Ishtanoi Limal Yusa, if the dye, the color became deeper and stronger, Shera, that's an indication that this is Tchelas. Legriyusa, but if the color changed and it got worse, Psula would be possible. V'simonech, and a simon to remember it is Shinu Sheker, Shinu Emes. A Shinu Sheker means if it turned bad, then we would conclude that this is not real Tchelas, but if it turned for the better, then we would assume that this is Tchelas. So the Gemara is challenging. We said earlier that you cannot be boidik Tchelas, but we've just demonstrated two methods with which you can check to make sure it's authentic Tchelas. So tomorrow, ma ein labadika namidika amar ateima. When it says ein labadika, it means you cannot tell if this tchelas was once used to test with, as a test coupon, and that is chemically identical to tchelas. It's just that it was used once shaloi l'shma, and therefore it wouldn't be able to be used. That's an impossible thing to test for. That's why you need to use very reputable vendors that will not play games and will only use kosher tchelas. Mar Mamshechi, Mar Mimoshchi, there was a yid from Moshchi, which was the name of a city. I see Techalta Bishni Rabachoi. In the times of Rabachoi, he went into the tchelas business, and he would buy dye with which he would dye wool and sell wool. He was in the business. And they needed to make sure that they could rely on this tchelas, and they needed to make sure that it was all authentic. So Rabbi Choy decided that we need to make sure that this vendor can be trusted. So Batkua with Rav Yitzchak Bered Rav Yehuda. They used Rav Yitzchak Bered Rav Yehuda's test with the urine, and in fact the color was degraded, which would indicate that this was not authentic tchelas. But then they did a secondary test, but you have Ada, where they baked it in this dough of barley, Yusa, and the color actually improved, which would indicate that it was tchelas. Because of this confusion, they thought that they should say this is not good tchelas. Amalu Rabbi told them, Ella, ha, loy techiltehi v'loy kaliilani. Yes, you have indications that it's not tchelas, but you also have indications that it's not kaliilan because it passed the second test. Eloshmamina, it must be that these are not two independent tests. This is a sequential process that you do. First test A and then test B if necessary. Eloshmamina shmuasa ahadadi itmar. These two halachas of these two tests were actually presented as a set. Hecha de batkana, but Rav Yitzchak Bered Rav Yehuda lo ifra chazusei kshera. If a dye should pass the first test, then it's clear that's proof positive that it's tchelas. But even if it fails, that's not proof positive that it's not chelas. Now it just casts a suspicion, which takes us to the second test. If it's chazuzay, but kinulabed Rav Ada b'chamira arkasa, and then ishtinli mal yusak shera, which is what happened in this case, like reyusa psula. So I don't understand why b'chalal do you need the second test? It might be that the first test was much easier to administer, and therefore they would do it first. And if it cleared the first test, there's no need to go further. But if it didn't, we don't write it off yet. We still put it through the second test, which might be more difficult to do, but at least we'll get our clarity. Sholchu mitam. They sent from there that Shmu'asa ahadodi itmar. That's how these tests were presented, to be working as a set, and that's how they were originally presented. There was never a machlokes here. Rav Mani dayik v'zavin k'chumri masnisa. Rav Mani, when he wanted to go into the tchelis business, he would be very, very careful in selecting vendors to supply him with the proper product and reliable product, like the Mishnah, like the Brisa we learned. You can't even tell if it was used as a test coupon. You had to deal only with highly reputable vendors. Amalei Ahu Saba, and Ahu Saba often refers to Eliyahu Novi, told him, this is what the Frierdiker used to do, be very meticulous in their selection of product, but Atlach Iskayu, and they were very successful. And the Mesivta brings down from the Gemara in Psachim that normally, if somebody was in the Techelis business, he would never become very wealthy. The reason why he would never become very wealthy is because if he would become very wealthy, he wouldn't want to operate a business that's such a hard business, and he would retire, and he would live off his investments, and then there wouldn't be someone to produce Techelis. So Hashem would make it bedavka that a person like that should never become very wealthy, because that would induce him to maybe retire. However, Ahu Saba said, since you do it with such an ehrlichkeit, clearly you're doing it l'shem shemayim, not just to make money. And therefore, even if you're wildly successful and you become very wealthy from this business, you'll likely stay in the business because you're going to want to be mizaka more people with the mitzvah of tchelas, and therefore I can give you a bracha that you'll be very, very successful. Tanu Rabbanon, halakech talis mitzuyetzes minashuk. We're right where we left off yesterday, because it has it over the dry cleaning process. Tanu Rabbanon, halakech talis mitzuyetzes minashuk. If you buy a pre-made set of tzitzis from the shuk, which we often do, so the halacha is mi Yisrael. If you buy it from a yid, harei b'cheskosa, you can assume it's kosher and everything was done properly. That's only if it's from a public merchant, right? No, that's from any yid. I apologize. But if you buy it from a goyish store, then minatagrik shera. If he's a store that he sells these types of items, then we assume he did it right. And Rashi tells us why, because there's no way he is going to try to rip you off, because the loymara nafshe, he would definitely not ruin his reputation, and then no one would ever buy by him. So he would be very careful only to buy from a reputable yid. However, in a hedyut psula, but if you just buy off Kijiji or off Facebook Marketplace or off the new app Carrot, then you just buy from somebody's personal stuff, that is psula zakrashi the shema hu tzava v'shaloi l'shmanasis. Well, that you wouldn't be able to buy from them, because it's very possible that this was done shaloi l'shman. There's no way to detect that. Yeah, you buy it from a Jewish company, so you could trust that the yid supervised and make sure it was good. V'yava pisha amru ein adam rashai limkar talis mitzuyetzes lo'evet gechaven. Even though the halacha is that you're not allowed to sell to a goy, so oy bazoi, how could you buy it from a goy? A goy couldn't have possibly bought it from a yid. You're not allowed to sell a completed beged of tchelas, a completed beged of tzitzis to a goy unless you undo the tzitzis. So it's not tzitzis. My timer, why is it that you're not allowed to sell a full pair of tzitzis to a goy? A little bit of an interesting reasoning. What does mishum zoyna mean? So there's two pshatim. Rashi says in one shot, Dilim Yahavile Zoyna Yisraelis. What happens if this guy wants to be mezana with a Jewish girl who is a Zoyna? Usvura Yisraelu. She is very selective with her clientele. She only is chaytei with a yid. But since he's coming with a tzitzis, v'tivoyle, she will accept him as a client, thinking that he's Jewish, and then va'avrin mishum lo tischaten bam. She'll be over lo tischaten bam. Now there are those who have difficulty with this Rashi because lo tischaten bam is only if she gets married to them, not a one-time znus. It's also very interesting to note that she's a zoina who's mafker herself but has standards, right? Lishnachrina mishum zoina oivedes kechavim. To the contrary, we're worried about a zoina ashikse. Dilmi yoyev lo ahu oivet kechavim be'asnana. He might give her this pair of tzitzis as an esnan zoina. But Amran she'll say ki Yisrael nosnali. She'll say that she got it from a Jewish man. She'll be able to say, she'll be able to accuse a Yid of going to a Zoyna, which would destroy him and his reputation and his family, and she has proof. I got his tzitzis. How else do I have this guy's tzitzis?
No.
So not with the monogram tzitzis.
There is such a case. I heard it. That it was a talus that was found in some shiksa's house. Yeah, but she happened to be a cleaning lady, so she stole it.
So you got to be very careful where you allow any monogrammed product to go.
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, I'm about to give my guys toques that have my logo on them. Now I'm thinking, after learning this Gemara, I'm thinking about this again, where one of them might show up. So Dr. Gemara, by time to give me Shem Soina. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, I'm sorry? Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Shema Yislav ve'imay b'derech v'yargenu. A much simpler reason. Normally, a Yid wouldn't travel alone with a goy through the forest because there's a danger the goy can kill him. But if you see a guy wearing tzitzis, you'll assume he's Jewish and you'll travel with him, and he might put yourself in danger. So these are the reasons why never sell tzitzis to a goy. Zogt Gemara weiter. Rabbi Yehuda Rami Tchilta Lefarzuma the Inchi Basi. He would put tchelas even for a beged that his wife would use. So even begodim that his wife would use, Rashi Shemeschasa bo Ishtoi. So he would do first. He would put tzitzis into the beged of a woman. That's A. And B is umevarech kol tzafra lisativ tzitzis. He also did another thing. Every day he would make a new bracha on his tzitzis. Zog to Gemara. Let's see what we could figure out from his activities. Midarami vibalt, he put tzitzis on his wife's beged. Rashi says tchilta lechasos lechsus ishtoi. That means kasaver noshim chayaves boy. It must be that he holds women are mechuyev in tzitzis, which means this mitzvah of tzitzis kasaver mitzvah say shaloy azman gramahu. He must hold alma kasaver Rashi mitzvah say shaloy azman grami. The zmano bein biyoyim uvein balayla. The zman grama, if it was a mitzvah say zman grama, noshim would be beturais, and clearly he holds that his wife is mechuyev. Frak to Gemara, that we understand. But amay mevorach kol tzafar v'tzafra. Why does he make a bracha every single day on his tzitzis? Zok to Gemara kerebi, because of Rebbe. The Tanya we learned tefillin kol zman shemanichon mevorach alein. Every time you put your tefillin on, you make a bracha on them. We make a bracha laniach tefillin al mitzvah tefillin every single day. Divrei Rebbe. Zok to Gemara, if that's the case, ihachi kol shaita nami. So why did he just make a bracha every morning on his tzitzis? Every time he took it off and put it on again, he should have made another bracha, just like with tefillin. So tomorrow, because Rabbi Yehuda in his tzniya hava, he was a very modest and a very modest person. And modest doesn't mean not showy. It means he's ehrlich, like in A.B. Rottenberg's song. Oh, you want to be honest? So on the invitation night, you remember that song? Okay. V'loi shorile liglime kula yoyma. He didn't take his beggar off all day. He didn't come home after work and kick his shoes off and put on his PJs. He would stay in his dress clothing all day, and therefore, and therefore, uh, and therefore, he didn't have to make a bracha more than once a day. The reason why in the morning he made a bracha was that's when he changed from his PJs to his street clothing. Let's see Rashi. Im kain the laila zmana amay mevarach el pam rishon kishenisativ kishoy chadash aval levarach. The very first time he puts on the beged, that's when he would make a bracha. Hamikan veilach yom arichadami the anlayla mafsikai. It's one long mitzvah because there's never a time where the chiv to do the mitzvah is not here, because he holds even by night is man tzitzis, because he said it's a mitzvah to say shalosh man grama. The teretz is kol yoyma elo balayla. He did take off his street clothing at night, but hilchach lemavarch el betzafra ula olam karebi, because that's when he took his clothes off. Umay shno mitzafra levarch kishu oimed usatev ba shmoyers koydem ayoyim legersei vasabes. Then he did it early in the morning before he learned. Umashani kimishani miksus laila chsus yoyim shnei talisos mitziyotzos hayu achas leyoyim v'achas lelayla. He had his day clothing, he had his night clothing. So when he transitioned, that's when he made a bracha. Tanu Rabbanan. I'm not sure why he wouldn't have made a bracha when he put on his night tzitzis. That I don't know. Zok more back to Tanu Rabbanan. Hakol chayovim betzitzis, kohanim, leviim, v'yisraelim, gerim, noshim, v'avodim. Rab Shimon poiter b'noshim. Rab Shimon holds that women are potter from tzitzis. Mipnei shemitzvah sasei shazman gramahu v'chol mitzvah sasei shazman grama noshim peturais. He held that women are the chiv tzitzis is not by night, and therefore it's a mitzvah sasei shazman grama, and therefore noshim are peturais. Omar Mar, let's analyze this brisa. Hakol chayovim betzitzis kohanim leviim v'yisraelim. Pshita, why would you think that a kohen would be different than any other yid in the fulfillment of the mitzvah of tzitzis? Di kohanim leviim v'yisraelim ptiri man lechayev. Why would, if they're potter, who is chayev? Of course, they are the yidden. Of course, they're mechuyev in tzitzis. So it's more the chiddush is kohanim et strichalei. The chiddush is not Levim and Yisraelim, but the chiddush is that a kohen is also governed by the halachas of tzitzis. Why would you think that a kohen is not mechuyev in tzitzis? So kedai dechamina hoy luksiv loy sil b'shatnes tzemer upishim yachtov gidilim taselacha. The Torah creates a hard link between the prohibition to wear shatnes and the chiyuv to wear tzitzis. So I might say mandala ishtri klaim legabei belavisha hudu mechayev b'tzitzis. Someone who is not exempt from the prohibitions of klayim, such a person is mechuyev in the mitzvah of tzitzis. But hani kayanim hoyel v'ishtri klaim legabayu. V'balt in their avnit, in their gartel, there was shavnis. So they are exempt from the isurim of klayim because they're commanded to wear an avnit every day. So you might think hu adin, the mitzvah that's linked to klayim, the mitzvah of tzitzis, loy lechayvu, kamash malon, that they're chayiv, nehida ishtri, be'idin avoida, even though, just because they have an exemption, and they're allowed to wear klayim, while they're doing avoida, wearing their big dikuna, beloy idin avoida, loy ishtri. Not during the shas avoida, they're not allowed to be wearing klayim. I'm sorry? These are all Jersey Kosovs. I mean, that's how Torah set it up. It's actually the Lublin strikes again, because that's this week's parashas Tetzaveh. We're actually learning about the big tikkun. Rab Shimon poiter b'noshim. Rab Shimon says women are potter. My timer to Rab Shimon. What's this for, Rab Shimon? The Tanya ur isim oisoi prat l'ksus laila. Where isim oisoi, a beggar that's seen, a ksus laila is not seen. In those days, they didn't have lights all over the place. I'm sorry. Once it's a mitzvah sasei shazman grama, so now women are potter. Ata oimer prat l'ksus laila. Is that what where isim oisoi is excluding? Maybe he's just telling you that a suma is not chayiv and tzitzis. Anything that you're covering yourself with, whether you see it or not, that would say that a suma does have to wear tzitzis. It would make more sense to say that it's referring to ksus laila, not to a ksus suma. What's the direct reason for the distinction? Because there is a re'isa ma'isai that's applicable to a ksusuma. Other people around them could see it. That's never seen because it's worn at night when it's dark. What about the Rabbanon who learn that there is a chiyuv of tzitzis by night? How do they explain this? Zok the Gemara. Hi asher techasaba my of delay, because why do you need asher techasaba l'rabbis ksusuma lo yitzrich Rashi? You don't need it to be marba ksusuma, because even a ksus laila is mechuyev in tzitzis. Surely a ksusuma. So my avdele, what do they use? What do they learn out of this pasuk? For the following limud in this following brisa. Al arba kanfos ksuscha. It says in the pasuk, Gedilim tasalacha al arba kanfos ksuscha asher techasaba. So we learn from there arba v'loy shalish. In order to be mechuyev in tzitzis, a beged has to have 4 corners. If it has 3 corners, it will not be mechuyev in tzitzis. Maybe what we learn from this pasuk is al arba kanfos ksuscha is if you have a beged with more than 4 corners, that's also not going to be mechuyev in tzitzis. Which is a ribui harebalas chomesh amor. That's marba, a beged with 5 corners. Umani mikayim al arba v'loy shalish. That's excluding 3. So I can ask the same question. Umar roish, you have a ribui, you have a miut. Why apply the miut to 3 and the ribui to 5? Maybe it should be exactly the opposite. Umar roish l'rabbis bal chomesh u'loitzi balas shalish. So kumar marba ni balas chomesh sheyesh bechlal chomesh arba. Because if you have 5 corners, it's actually still a beged with 4 corners. But umoitza ni balas shalish she'ein bechlal shalish arba. A beged with 3 corners does not have 4 corners. So that's what the Rabbanan learn from Asher Techasaba. They learn that a beged of 3 does not need tzitzis, while a beged of 5 does. Rab Shimon, how will Rab Shimon know this halacha? May Asher nafka, says Asher Techasaba. That word Asher is marbe, even a beged with 5 kronos. Rabbanan Asher lo mashmalahu, and the Rabbanan, they don't think that you could learn from the word Asher anything kabaltic. Zok the Gemara. V'Rabbanan, hay re'isem oisai my avdilei. What are they going to do with their re'isem oisai? Rab Shimon said it's telling you that a ksus laila is part from tefillin, is part from tzitzis. But they learned the Rabbanan that a ksus laila is chayiv. So what is he going to learn from a re'isem oisai? So look at the Tanya. Re'isem oisai uzachartem. You learn from here the power of mitzvahs tzitzis. Rei mitzvah, look at this mitzvah of tzitzis, uzechar mitzvah acheres, and it will remind you to a different mitzvah. Hatluyba, that's connected to the mitzvah of tzitzis. Ve'ezai zu, which mitzvah is connected to the mitzvah of tzitzis? Zu kriya shema, that is the mitzvah of kriya shema. Ditnan me'emos eikarin eshema b'shachris. At what point is it light enough, day enough, to be mekayim the mitzvah of kriya shema b'shachris? Misha yakir ben tcheles lelavan. When you could look at your tzitzis and you could see a distinction between the blue threads and the white threads, that's when you know it's light enough. Now, I don't think I really touched this accurately according to Rashi. Rashi says, "Nischai b'mitzvah zu sheheir hayoim nischai b'chol mitzvahs the roiv mitzvahs and the hegis b'yoim v'Rab Shimoni." That's a little weiter. But Tosfos says, "Ben tcheles l'lovin bebracha shamrinon ben tcheles shaba l'lovin shaba." which means Pirish Bekudris in Brachas, that is, Bein Tzemer Shekolat Tzevat Cheles, Letzemer Shaloi Kalat. That's when you can look at wool. If you want to see two pieces of wool, which one absorbed the dye well and which one didn't, when it's light enough to make that distinction, that's the point where you could do the mitzvahs of the Yom. Velesa Demkein Ma Ri'izu. Or Ma Ra'izu. What is the Raya? I'm not sure what he's asking. Uvarich Pirish Bein Chulya Shal Tcheles Lechoya Shalovan in your tzitzis. So I guess it's Nagei Dafka tzitzis. If it's time looking at wool, what does that have to do with the tzitzis? So the Aruch explains is when you're looking at your tzitzis, you can see the difference between the blue thread and the white thread. By Kama de Brachas Yushalmi, Kini Masnisin Bein Tcheles Shal Betzitzis Lalovan Shabbat. Isa Moisai min asamuch. Rabbi Lazar the Amar Kadesh Yaker ben Tchelas LaCrazy. Isa Moisai Shei Nicker ben Asfuyim. So I guess the whole point is when you're looking at your tzitzis, not when you're looking at two pieces of wool. That has to bedavka be tzitzis because that's why it's relevant to the Isa Moisai who's charta. It's not be learned. My must occur in Shema b'shachlis mishiyaker ben Tchelas Lavan. The Tanya Yidach we had another brayso. Isa Moisaizachartem rei mitzvah zu uzachor mitzvah cheres hasmuchala. Veizoi, Zu, which one is it? Zu mitzvahs klayim. You'll remember the mitzvah of klayim, Tichsiv loy silbish, shatnes, tzemer, upishtim yachtov. Gedilim tasalacha. So the fact that they're connected, when we wear tzitzis, we're in this dares not to wear klayim. Tanya Yidach, Urisa Moshe Chaitim as kol mitzvahs Hashem, kivin shenischayev odem b'mitzvah zu, once someone is mechuyev in the mitzvah of tzitzis, meaning it's daybreak already. Nischayev bechol ha-mitzvahs kulan. For Rab Shimon, it's going to Rab Shimon, Damer mitzvahs asay shazman gramahi. So this last limud is not going back to tell us what the Rabbanon learned from Mishat Chasaba. This is a new limud that Rab Shimon learns that once it's daybreak, you're mechuyev in all mitzvahs that are only relevant by day, and that's what Rashi was referring to. Shehei rayoim nischayev bechol mitzvahs, the right mitzvahs nahagas payoim. For Rab Shimon, it's going according to Rab Shimon. Lishnachrina, kivin shenischayev adam. Shigil chal mitzvah. It's referring to not the daybreak, but it's referring to someone who becomes a bar mitzvah. Then Yud Gimel Shana nischayev b'chol mitzvahs. Once you become a mechuyev in tzitzis, you're automatically mechuyev in all mitzvahs. Ulahachi also ikar milsa. That's the main thing. Rab Shimoni the poiter b'noshim. It's going according to Rab Shimon who holds noshim are potter. The Rabbanon, if it's going according to the Rabbanon, he can noshim chayavos by upeturis mikam mitzvahs. You can't say you're mechuyev in all mitzvahs because women are not. Tanya Yidach, or Isma Yisrael, you zachartem, it's called mitzvahs Hashem, shkula mitzvah zu, keneged kol ha-mitzvahs kulan. The mitzvah of tzitzis is so powerful, it's shakel, keneged all the mitzvahs, and Rashi brings up the gematria again, b'dechsiv es kol mitzvahs, v'oid, the tzitzis b'gematria tof reish, tzitzis is b'gematria, if you count the two yuds, is 600, the Hek Sherm, the 5 knots, which is 605, the Ches Chutin, 605 plus 8, is 613, so therefore, Re'iyas Tzitzis, Mevil, they Zechir's mitzvahs, because the Tzitzis includes in it the gematria of all the mitzvahs. The Tanya Yidach, Re'iyas Moisei Zechaitem Basisam, Re'iyah, Mevil, they Zechira, it will remind us about the mitzvahs. Uzechira, once we have the awareness of the mitzvahs, Mevil de Asiyah, that will induce us to actually fulfill the mitzvahs. Rabbi Shimon Yochi Omer, Kol HaZorez b'mitzvah zu, if someone is Zorez, to be Mekai in the mitzvah of tzitzis, Zoiche u'mekabel pnei shchina. He'll be Zoiche to be Mekabel the pnei shchina. Shavach Arisa Moisoi, Uchshavasam, as Hashem Alekecha Tira, V'oisoi Savoid, there it's referring to Rebbeinu Shloim Malal Shchina, Avkan is Shchina. Tonder Rabbanan, Chavivin Yisrael Shesibavan HaKadosh Baruch Hu, B'mitzvahs. We're chaviv to the Rebbeinu Shloim because the Rebbeinu Shloim surrounded us with mitzvahs. Tefillin b'rasheim, utfillin b'zra'isayim. We have tefillin on our heads and our arms. V'tzitzis b'vigdayim, and we have tzitzis on our begodim. U'mezuzah lepeschayim, and our door has a mezuzah on it. V'aleim Omar David, and on these mitzvahs, David HaMelech referred to, and he said, Sheva bayoim hilalticha. I'm praising you about the seven mitzvahs per day. Al mishpatei tzidkecha, and Rashi counts them out. Rashi sheva b'yom tefillin b'roish u'v'zroya, that's 2 hareish time. V'arba tzitziyos, so 2 and 4 is 6. U'mezuzah hareish sheva, that's the v'sheva b'yom hilal ticha. When David walked into the Beis HaMerchetz, and he saw himself not dressed, Amar, he said, Oy li she'emayid arim b'lo mitzvah. Could you imagine? I'm stripped of all my mitzvahs. That's not good. After he left and he was able to say Divrei Torah, Amar ale Ashira shenemar labnatzecha al shminis mizmor David al mila shenitna b'shmini. He was grateful to the Rebbeinu Shalom that the mila will never leave him. There are those who bring a rye from here that when you go to the bathroom, you keep your tzitzis on, which we do. No one takes off their tzitzis to go to the bathroom, because if that was the case, then David HaMelech should have had the same encounter when he went to the bathroom. But he didn't. He only had it when he went to the merchetz. I'm sorry? Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, Kol sheyesh lo tefillin b'roishoi, u'tefillin b'zroyoi, v'tzitzis b'vigdoi, u'mezuzah b'peschoi. He's fully decked out. HaKoil b'chizik shlo yechta. That now he's fortified, it will protect him from doing averis. Someone who's fully dressed, it sort of fortifies him and gives him strength to protect him from the Yitzhara. When you have a threefold protection, that's not going to unravel very quickly. Soviv lireyav, a malach rests around those who fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, vayichaltem, and fortifies them and protects them. Tanya, Hoya Rab Meir Omer, man nishtana tchelas mikol mini tzevoinim. Vos ebes HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted us to have a psil tchelas on our beged and not any other color. Zogt the Gemara, mipnei shat tchelas doime layam. Tchelas is doime to the yam. It's the blue color of the ocean. The yam doime l'rekia, and the yam looks like the shemayim. Urekia l'kisei hakavod, and the rekia looks like the kisei hakavod. Shenemar v'tachas raglov k'maisa livnas hasapir, under the Hashem's feet, meaning his chair looked like the bricks of sapir. Uche'etzem hashemayim l'toyar, and it looked like the etzem hashemayim. So the kisei hakavod looked like the shemayim. Evan Sapir the Muskise. Evan Sapir is also the Muskise. So the Kisei HaKavod looked like Evan Sapir, which was Ke'etzem HaShamayim L'Toyar, and that's what Chelis reminds us of. So the Welt asks, isn't that a little bit of a far-fetched cheshbon? That you see a color and you're going to make such a long shaila? So I once it over from Rabbi Ehrentrei, he said over, why did we get the mitzvah of tzitzis? Because Avraham Avinu said, Mechut v'atzroi chanal, I'm not even going to take a shoelace from, I think it was the Melech Sodom. Why? From Avimelech? Because Shemayomer Ani Asharti is Avram. I don't need him saying that I was the one who made Avram wealthy. Come on. If you accept a tissue from somebody, you accept a shoelace from somebody, he's going to claim that he made you wealthy. It's a very, very far-fetched concern. So stated in the Gemara, Avraham Avinu, he was so concerned, even for the most far-fetched situation that could lead to Achil Hashem, he was zoche to a mitzvah that requires a far-fetched cheshbon to see how it's doimeli rikia. Tanya Hoyer Meir Omer, Gadol Einshay Shalovan Yosy Einshay Shal Tchelas. If you don't put love on tzitzis that are white, there's a bigger einish for that than if you don't put tzitzis of tchelas. Because clearly, it's much easier to acquire Lavan than it is to acquire Tchelas. He told his two servants, bring me a chaysim merely made out of tit, very, very easy to acquire. And the other one, he said, I want you to bring me a seal of gold. Neither one fulfilled their mission. Who's going to get punished more severely? Because it was much easier to get, and he didn't make the effort to get. What is this chaysim? Rashi says, it was some type of chaysim that they put on the eved. It was his Haidi badge. Tanya Rab Meir Omer Chayav Adam Levarech Meya Brachas B'chal Yom. Oh, we should learn this Mishnah, this Gemara, Lila Nishmas, Rav Elia ben Reb Moshe. El Haber, this was his favorite Gemara. Chayiv Adam Levarach Meya Brachos B'chol Yoim. A person is mukuyev to make 100 brachas every day. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, this is mamish. Whenever Eli will have you say this to light up. The Ato Yisrael Mo Hashem Alekecha Shal Mimcha. What already is Hashem asking from you? And Rashi tells us Mo. You should read it Miloshon Meya. Rab Chia Bared Rab Avia B'Shabbata U'V'Yoyim Tovi, where he didn't make so many brachas, because Shmona Esrei, which is 18 brachas, we don't have on Shabbos. We only have 7 brachas. So what would he do? Torach u'mamalalahu b'sparmaki u'megadi. He would smell besamim to make brachas, besamim, and he would eat different types of nash to be able to continue making brachas so that he could reach the sum total of 100. Before we do this, let's just quickly look at Tosfos Shoyal Meimach Pirush Rabbeinu Tam to have a mole v'yeshmeya oisiyos b'pasuk. If you count the words of the pasuk of Ata Yisrael Ma Hashem Elakecha Shoyal Meimach, there's 100 letters in that long pasuk. V'yesh mefarshim the ma oila ba'atbash meya. If you use the atbash code, where instead of a aleph you replace it with a taf, then the word mem hey would add up to 100. So that's another remez to 100 brachas. Uvekuntus pirush al trikri mo ele mo, with the extra aleph which reads 100. Klemish shechayev kuf brachos v'yesh mefarshim kedei lahashlim meya ba'oisiyoseh v'chikaris meya harei kulam. Meaning you'll be mashlim 100 with all the oisis of that pasuk, and when you read 100 letters, you've accounted for all of the words in the pasuk, is what I think. Zog to Gemara. Tanya Rab Meir Omer Chayav Adam Levarach Shalosh brachos b'chol yoyim. A person has to make 3 brachas every day. Elohein, which 3 brachas? She'asani Yisrael, Shelo Yasani Isha, and Shelo Yasani Bur. You didn't make me into a bur. Very interesting 3 brachas. Rabbi Achabe Yaakov Shomei Levarei, he heard a son. Dava Kamavorach Shelo Yasani Bur. And he said, what type of bracha is that? Amalek Kula Hai Nami. Look, Rashi, the Mishabachas Navshacha, the Einach Amoritz, you're praising yourself that you're not an Amoritz? That's a little bit much. You're giving yourself a bracha. Lishnachrina Kula Hainami. Bishlama Ovid Kachavim V'Isha. I understand why you're making a bracha that you're not a goy, you're not an Isha. Hoyavoloi B'nei Mitzvah Shabbat Maverachas. You're thankful that you're mechuyev in all the mitzvahs. Elabur Bar Mitzvah. A bor is still has all the rights of every other yid. He has the opportunity to be mekayim every mitzvah. So what's your bracha shelo yasani bor? Amalei. So he told his father, "Velamai mavarach. What bracha should I make?" Zok to Gemara shelo yasani eved. So you want me to make a bracha shelo yasani eved? Eved hainu isha. That's the same thing as an isha. Why? Rashi says 2 reasons. Either because the isha nami shivcha labayla ke'eved l'rabbi, a woman is also meshubah to her husband, but lishnachrina look Rashi, because an eved has the same mitzvahs as an isha. So if you're trying to make 2 brachas, shaloyas and the aved and shaloyas and isha are the same, because it's the same set of mitzvahs that you're excluding yourself from. Hainu shaloyas and eved hainu isha. Zok Gemara eved zil tfei. Being an Eved is still a little bit lower, as Rashi says. So first you make a bracha shaloyas on the goy, then shaloyas on the Aved, and then shaloyas on the Isha, because it's a build-up. That's one shot. It's the same thing as an Isha, as far as the mitzvahs are concerned. But I need the brachas. I got to make my 3 brachas, so I'll have to include that in my brachas as well. As Tosfos says, zil tfei, avalabur loy mevarchinen. You don't say because of zilt fei you should make a bracha shlois on the bor. That already you don't do. The einoi motzi, the hava kol she'einoi loy b'mikra, v'loy b'mishna, v'loy b'dercheret. A bor is someone who doesn't have any of these things. That's very rare to occur, that someone should be a bor. A bor is a really low level. V'nira Yosy shemavarcha eved, v'isha she'ein mitzuvin kamoisoi, because they don't have the mitzvahs that a Yisrael has, and therefore a bor shouldn't be separated out and acknowledged. Okay, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem, we were finished. Daf Mem Gimel, we got mugged, and tomorrow we're going to gribble in the mud, in the Mem Dalet.
Yeah.
David, if you're not going to be here for Purim, but and you're leaving before Shabbos,
Yeah.
okay, so then I have to.